Good morning, everyone. We will just wait for a few people to log in and we'll be starting shortly. A few more coming.
Fantastic.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Judy Stenmark. I'm the CEO of Consumer Healthcare Products Australia, and I'm delighted to be chairing this session, this special webinar today on sustaining remote performance and engagement. As remote and hybrid work models become the norm, leaders face new challenges in maintaining high performance engagement and well-being across dispersed teams. This session will explore Gallup's latest insights into what drives sustained productivity and emotional commitment in remote environments. We will examine the critical role of manager support, strengths-based development, and clear communication in fostering a culture of trust and accountability, while helping to mitigate psychosocial hazards such as isolation, burnout, and role ambiguity. Participants will gain practical strategies to build connection, measure engagement effectively, and create a thriving remote workplace. Whether you are leading a fully remote team or navigating hybrid dynamics, this session will equip you with tools to sustain momentum and unlock long-term performance. Just to let you all know, we will share the PowerPoint after this session and the links, and we will be recording it. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Hannah Lomax, who is the Senior Workplace Advisor for Gallup. Hannah helps organizations build high-performing cultures through evidence-based strategies that boost engagement, talent development, and well-being. A Gallup-certified strengths coach, Hannah partners with leaders across EMEA and APAC to unlock potential and drive business outcomes. So I'm delighted to welcome you, Hannah, this morning.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Judy. It's such a pleasure to be here. And thank you, everyone, for giving up some time on a Wednesday morning to dive into some really important techniques that we're going to arm you with as you think about how we can really boost not just performance and engagement, but actually to transform the employee experience wherever it is that you're spending time at work. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here. As Judy mentioned, my name is Hannah Lomax. I've been with Gallup for about 6 years. Most of those years, as you may have guessed from my accent, were spent in our London office. And really what I spend my time doing every day is helping leaders, managers, and individuals to unlock their potential. At Gallup, we're all about creating and sustaining thriving workplaces. So I do feel like I'm very lucky in the work that I do. I get to see a lot of growth and change and transformation in organizations. My background is in all things occupational and organizational psychology. So I'm really curious about the science of success, human behavior. So Gallup is really just the perfect place for me to spend my time. So as Judy mentioned, there's going to be a lot of data, a lot of information. We're going to dive into lots of different research. So we'll make sure that we share all of those links with you after the session. And if there are any questions that we don't cover today, please feel free to reach out to me. There is a Q&A box, and I've promised to leave some time at the end to make sure that we cover anything that comes up for you. So with that, we'll dive straight in. So for those of you who've not heard of Gallup before, we're most famous for our Gallup World Poll. So every single year, we invest in actually listening to the voice of the world. So we go out and we take a representative sample of about 98% of the world's population. We go into all of the countries that we can. There's only about 4 that we can't get into. And we're really trying to understand how people are experiencing the world. So we're studying things like thriving. We're also measuring things like slavery. We're investigating access to clean water. We're also really in the business of understanding humans' experiences of work, of the world at work and outside. So you may have heard of the Global Happiness Report. That's something that we partner with many organizations to gather the data for. And we also have just published the Global Emotional Health Report. So we're very, very invested in understanding people and measuring what matters most. We've got lots of clients that we work with in our workplace analytics part of the business. So when we're not doing public sector work, we're really focusing on that workplace experience. So with all of the data that we're able to collect about how people are thriving, what's working, what's not working, we actually turn that analytics into advice. So many of you may have heard of the Clifton Strengths Assessment, which we're going to talk a little bit more about today. That's really a talent development assessment. It helps measure what's naturally innate when you think about your talent profile. We publish books that are often part of the Wall Street Journal. We also have many executive coaches all around the world. So we're a global organization in many different countries, and we partner with all types of businesses. Many are in the healthcare pharma space, which is very relevant for today, but we also work with governments, education sector, we work with law firms, we work with insurance organizations, manufacturing, construction, you name it. We've got a real breadth of clients, and that really helps us to study patterns of behavior in organizations. So because that's really our area of expertise, we cover lots of different workplace topics. So you can see just a few of those things on the right-hand side that relate to culture, employee experience, leadership, strengths, but actually we do some really custom work as well. One of the global indicators that we have access to is the hybrid world of work. So we have a website that I'll share with you in the follow-up, but we have lots of global indicators that we measure. We really study the current pulse of the world. So in the US, this is tracked quarterly. It is expanding. Our world poll happens every year, and we study the state of the global workplace, which covers almost every country. So that is data that is published every single year. But that kind of faster pulse that's quarterly is mostly focused in the US, but we do find similarities with, for example, Australia and the UK, when we look at the difference between some of those nuances between the different countries. So again, we'll make sure that you have access to all of those live reports and research. So we've got quite a bit to get through today. These sessions are kind of always fast and furious, but we're going to start with really just laying the context. So we're going to start with just some data points and insights. So forgive me, you're going to see lots of graphs and bar charts and lots of analytics for the next few slides, but then I promise that we're going to get to that real actionable section around strategies for success. So when we think about the current work location trends, what we know is that hybrid is the most popular option. Now, this graph is studying people that can work remotely. So these are people that can do their jobs from home. We've not included people who have to be in the office, this specific graph. We do have data on that, but since we're talking about remote and hybrid, this would exclude people that have to be in a certain work location. So that dark blue bar at the top, as you can see, is hybrid. Now that's growing. Of course, in that peak remote work, you may remember COVID-19, wasn't that a challenging time for everybody? So that's a little bit of an anomaly in some of the data there, but it definitely changed the way that people were thinking about performance and engagement at work. So that dark blue line at the top is hybrid. We also know that exclusively remote working did drop, but it's starting to pick up a little bit again. So people are getting used to working from home. There are lots of benefits to that, which we're going to talk about as well. So it is creeping back up again. And then that on-site line is pretty stagnant. It's dropped a little bit. From sort of 2022, and then it's creeping just back up again from 19 to 21 across this year. So it really depends on so many different things, you know, what your organization's policy is, whether you can work from home, flexibility around caring for elderly parents, maybe making sure that you're at home with your pets or your children. There are lots of different factors that influence people's choices when they do have autonomy, but we do know that hybrid seems to be consistently the most popular option when people are given that choice. When we think about the future trends, we actually know that hybrid is on the rise. So we asked people what they would prefer in the future. And actually, this was really interesting to see that not only is hybrid on the rise, so is exclusively remote. It feels like on-site is actually the option that's dropping. Now, again, those personal preferences are definitely going to be playing a role into whether people get used to working from home and no longer want to give up that commute time, whether people actually miss that in-person connection. Maybe they want a little bit of a break from, the four walls of their home environment, and they really value stepping outside of their typical home environment and actually having that change of scenery. There are lots of different factors that influence this. Of course, for some people, they don't have a choice and they are required to be in the office for a certain amount of days per week. But actually, with people who are given that choice, we know that their most preferred option, which is continuing to increase, is that hybrid option. So we know that there are many different impacts of work location preferences. How you set yourself up for the day will really influence not just your engagement and your performance, but things like your relationships, things like your daily habits and routine, the way that you connect with people, your productivity as well. For some people, they're much more focused at home. They're not distracted by conversations with their work friends about the weekend. For other people, they actually really prefer to come into the office and just knuckle down and have that opportunity to speak to the people around them about current priorities, challenges. So there is a huge variance in the impact of work location preferences. But again, when we look at those recurring patterns of behavior, what we know is that when people are not in the environment that they would like to be in, so when there's a mismatch between where they'd like to be working and where they actually are working. So for example, if they'd like to be working from home, but they're required to come into the office, and that's creating a mismatch between their preferred location and their actual location, we know that this has a huge impact, not just on their engagement, which is dropping quite a bit there. That's 11 percentile points, which is a pretty big drop. It's also impacting their life evaluation. So the way that they experience their life as a whole is very damaged when they're not able to work in their preferred location. We can see there on the right-hand side that people who have that mismatch are 24% less likely to be thriving. We measure thriving at Gallup. We ask you to think of your life on a ladder, with 10 being the best possible life and 0 being the worst possible life. We need people to be at about an 8 or above to consider themselves as thriving. We also know that if there is that mismatch, they're 27% less likely to be engaged at work. Now, we're going to dive into the impact of engagement on performance today. But if you think about that mismatch, it just really highlights the importance of giving people that option when you can, or if you can't give them that choice, knowing how it's going to feel and making sure that the elements of being in that location that's required of them is the best possible working experience for them if it's not their preferred location. We also know that that mismatch is driving intent to leave and burnout. There is a high chance now that people who don't have autonomy in where they're able to work are going to look elsewhere. It is almost an expectation of organizations now to offer some type of flexibility. I remember when I was in London and COVID had kind of settled down, and lots of our clients were saying to us, should we force people to come back? What's Gallup's data telling us? And actually, the biggest factor that influenced how people experienced their organization was whether they were given a choice. So if people were forced to come in, even if they wanted to come in 3 days a week anyway, the fact that they were told they had to really damaged that relationship that they had with their organization, that connection, that sense of pride and purpose. So it's really important to consider that. Now, unfortunately, for some people, they're not going to have that choice, but it's just important to be mindful of. We also know that burnout is increased when people don't necessarily have that choice. If you think about the commute time, for example, people often swapped out that commute time for a jog in the park, for more time with their children, walking their children to school. Maybe they were able to get in an extra yoga or Pilates class, or maybe get a little bit more of a lie-in in the morning. So it's actually not surprising that when there is that mismatch, burnout can happen. It also works in the reverse way for people that want to be in the office and can't, feeling like you've lost that connection and that physical time with your colleagues. That can also lead to burnout for some people who are wired that way. And we're going to talk more about how we're wired later on today when we get into the Clifton Strengths world. So what we also know, and I mentioned it just slightly there, is that actually if you are exclusively remote and denied flexibility, you're 61% of people in that position are extremely likely to look for opportunities elsewhere. Now, we already know that there is a war for talent at the moment. We're seeing a lot of people staying in jobs that they're not particularly happy with. So they might stay even though they're not engaged, and they're desperate to get out. They're desperate to find something new. The waiting between whether employees or employers sort of have the power from a talent pool standpoint is a pendulum that's constantly swinging. But actually what we know from our research, particularly highlighted in Gallup's State of the Global Workplace report, which we'll make sure that you get a copy of today, is that it is even harder today to retain talent. There is a strong percentage of people, about 42% of people across Australia and New Zealand, who are looking for other opportunities. So it's really important to make sure that the people that are showing up for work every day feel valued, are having a great time. We also know that this is particularly loud for Gen Z. Good old Gen Z, the youngest of the group. There are a huge number of people in this category entering the workforce, rising up those ranks, stepping into those leadership positions, sort of early 30s, late 20s. And actually, I recently delivered a session on multi-generational diversity for one of our clients. This is a really interesting group of people. They are harder to engage. They're a little bit more demanding, shall we say. And that's not necessarily a bad thing when we think about some of the laws that are coming in around protecting employees, psychosocial hazards. Actually, they're kind of a voice for that safety at work, for being treated fairly, for making sure that the expectations that are placed upon you are not detrimental to your physical or mental health. However, we know that in that manager position, it's really hard to keep these people happy. The bar is a little bit higher. So they're a little bit louder about what they want. And we know that Gen Z are most likely to prefer a hybrid and are least likely to prefer fully remote. Gen Z have a very, very strong need for purpose. In fact, in a recent study that we did, they would actually take purpose over pay in many cases. You needed to give them about a 20% pay rise for them to stay in a job that they didn't feel connected to the purpose in. So they're a little bit more fluid, a little bit more transactional. It's harder to keep them in an organization. So we know that actually that human connection for them, the opportunity to go into an office, connect with people in person, have FaceTime with leadership, learn from other people who have had many years of experience, is particularly important for this generation of people who are making up a huge percentage of the workforce today. So there are lots of different advantages and challenges of remote and hybrid work. And again, I just want to make it clear that this study is not exhaustive or exclusive of many other things that people may be experiencing. This is just a generalized kind of pattern. So if there's something that feels like an advantage or a challenge to you that doesn't show up, it's definitely still the case for you. That's how you're experiencing it. But this is kind of what we're seeing as the most common perceptions of advantages and of challenges in the workforce. So if we look at that left-hand side, the green bar is representing the top 5 advantages perceived by employees of hybrid work. So a lot of people are saying that there's that improved work-life balance. That makes sense. More time to lie in, go to the gym, have a cup of coffee, whatever it is that you like to spend time doing. Less time stuck commuting, which often feels very frustrating. Also, a more efficient use of time throughout the day and week. Often people are in the office, they're being asked lots of different questions by people. It can feel a little bit harder to focus. People also get a lot of house chores done when they're working from home. So it gives them a little bit more free time outside of those working hours on the weekend. They might have had their groceries done or done their washing, and actually it feels like they're not having to be tied to so many household chores in their pleasure time. Employees also say that there's less burnout or fatigue at work when they're working from home. Again, everyone's got their personal opinion on why that is, but I think a lot of that is to do with actually just the hours that you get back by not being stuck in long meetings where you're unable to maybe multitask, you're not having long commute times. And also that sense of freedom to choose where you work has been a huge benefit. You may have remembered in COVID that there were people dialing in from tropical beaches all around the world, remote working from a beach. Maybe they've got the opportunity to explore a different city. They might go and rent out an Airbnb. They might go and visit friends and family and remote work from there. And that can also lead to higher productivity. Having more autonomy over how you structure your day when you're working from home, because you're not being pulled in lots of different directions, can actually help people be more focused. We also know that there were quite a lot of extra hours that went into work during COVID. Again, if you're not commuting, some people are more likely just to jump on and check their emails, maybe get a few things done in the evening. They haven't had that long, tiring day in the office. So for some people, that productivity does go up. When we think about the challenges, it's quite a different experience. So again, these are all perceived by employees rather than leaders and managers. One of the challenges is less access to work resources and equipment. So again, I think everyone went through that whole, how do I set my desk up at home? Are the company going to pay for me to have a second screen, a good monitor, a good headset, a comfy chair? Everyone's there with their kind of neck and back pain, from actually having to work from a kitchen table or maybe even their bedroom if they're a student and they're house sharing. So that was a big challenge. Also, just having access to the people if you needed to ask a quick question. When you're on Teams, you don't have to answer somebody. You can actually choose to decline that call. Whereas if you're in the office and somebody comes up to you, it's pretty rude to ignore them. So a lot of people were sharing that they just couldn't get the answers to their questions as quickly. Again, depending on the type of work that you're in, for some people, they were needing access to maybe books or materials for their job, a printer that actually were just a little bit trickier to get their hands on. Some people also felt less connected to their organization's culture. Now, when you think about those water cooler conversations in the office, when you're hearing about what other people are getting up to, when you've got those leaders who are present, who are sharing about the organization's mission, purpose, you're experiencing that culture, because culture is who you spend time with every day. When you're just at home, doing your daily tasks every day, there can be a wider gap between you and your role and that culture of the organization. No surprises, decreased collaboration with my team. People get busier, right? So actually spending time as a team is something that gets very, very reduced when we're in that remote setting. Also, the quality of that time together. I'm definitely guilty of multitasking on team calls, especially when you're under pressure and there's lots to do and you kind of have your Zoom or Teams call on one screen, but actually you've got your inbox on another screen, or that deck that you needed to finish by the end of the day. Sometimes the quality can be compromised. So that collaboration isn't always as powerful as it could be when you're in a remote setting, which can lead to those impaired working relationships. When you're remote, you've actually got to go out of your way to set up dedicated time with the people that you've got those relationships with. It takes effort and investment to nurture them, right? Whereas if you're in the office, you might just have your regular morning coffee together. You might walk and grab, a lunch together. You might get the same train home. So actually those relationships can take a hit. And I think that also leads to the final one, which is no surprise, that cross-functional communication and collaboration. Often when we're working remotely, we only talk to other teams when we absolutely have to, rather than just organically. So quite different when we think about those experiences of the advantages and challenges, quite a different set of perceptions there. What do leaders believe are the biggest drawbacks for hybrid work? Now, this was super interesting. It was very similar to what the employees were experiencing, which I think is a good thing, right? Because at least they're not worlds apart. They're sort of in touch with what's missing. And it was really those negative impacts around communication, collaboration, and culture. So what are we going to do? When we think about how hybrid workers spend most of their time when they're in the office, it is that collaboration. It's that time with colleagues. And actually, there's a pretty big gap between time spent working independently when you're in the office and time spent working with your colleagues. When we go into the office, we tend to spend less time working independently and we spend more time collaborating. We've all heard of things like Team Tuesdays, where we actually all choose to go into the same day. We kind of block out our schedules. We organize a nice lunch or something. So you can be very intentional with getting that quality time back in. But actually, when we're working from home, we spend a lot more time working independently. So we can start to see that pattern really coming through when it relates to that collaboration, that communication, that cross-functional connection. A bit of a gap there. When we're working from home, we've got much less time with colleagues. And actually, this is no surprise. So if we look at this graph here, on the left-hand side, we're looking at people who are exclusively remote. Now, that tall dark blue bar is that most people exclusively remote are spread across different work locations. Whereas if we look at hybrid, actually, most are based out of the same physical location, 39% in that green bar. So actually the chances are that when we're hybrid, on the days that we do go into the office, we're going to see most people that we are expected to work closely with. Even better when we're on site, 62% of people are in the same location. So actually, one of the things that's important to think about is when you do get the chance to spend time together in person, how are we actually bringing together different locations? Now, lots of organizations, I'm sure many of you on the call are global. So unfortunately, we probably don't have the budget to fly everyone to Japan, once a month for some quality team time together. But actually, when we do have the chance to spend time together, it's really important to make sure that we're considering as many of those locations as possible. So in Australia, often when I'm going to run team workshops, I might fly over to Melbourne and the client there has flown everyone in from Adelaide, from Perth, from Sydney, and they've actually made the effort to bring all of those people that they can together, even just for a day. Definitely worth doing. So we're going to dive now into some of those strategies. So that was a bit of the data dump to kind of paint the picture and set the scene. But actually, there are 5 things that we know are really important. And no matter how virtual the workplace becomes, our greatest strength is still each other. We're a business of people, right? And engagement grows when we recognize what makes people strong and we help them use it together. We know that the sum of 2 parts is far more powerful than just working on our own. Those powerful partnerships are incredibly important. So things that we know are working for remote and hybrid organizations when we study this forensically are these 5 things here. So define ways of working as a team, measure what matters, focus on strengths, have meaningful conversations, and also that connection to purpose. So we're just going to take a deep dive into each of these, and then I can see that we've already got some questions coming in. So thank you so much. We'll make sure that we get to all of these at the end. So the first one is to have a dedicated conversation as a team about ways of working. Now, when we think about hybrid teams, the three focal areas that actually come up in a team discussion when we know that we're studying success around this setting is collaboration, communication, and information sharing. And we've actually thought about some coaching questions that can help you here. So when we think about collaboration, it's the basics. It's things like, how often do we need to be connecting as a team? Daily, weekly, monthly? How do we know when people are available? If somebody has an hour each day that they know is a good time to be contacted to their team, it's actually really important to share that. We've all got different preferences around communication styles as well. So for some people, they might really enjoy it that when their team members ring them on the way to go and pick up their children, that works really well for them. For others, they might see that as absolutely out of bounds territory, and they're going to be really frustrated if they're receiving calls, on their personal phone. Some people love those fast team messages. I'm definitely one of those people. I know that I can actually get back to people quickly, even if I'm on a call. It's that fast feedback. But for some people, they'd actually just rather that you pick up the phone and have a conversation with them. So it's really important to make sure that you're clear on that. Response time is also important. We're going to get to strengths in a moment, but I am somebody who likes to do things quickly. There's often a bit of a joke in my team that I respond before somebody's even pressed send, and that is just how I'm wired. But what it means is that sometimes I expect that from other people, which is completely unrealistic. So in our team discussion, my team have agreed that they'll get back to me that same day. So I know not to chase people until it gets to kind of dinner time and I'm starting to think, okay, I didn't hear back from Sally. It's okay to give her a call now. Maybe she just missed that message, or maybe she has had other things going on. So it's really important to have some of those ground rules that you've all agreed on to create that safe space. Information sharing as well. This can be one of the biggest bugbears when we think about remote working. There is nothing worse than not being able to get access to that document that you need. It also is just as frustrating if you know that somebody has the answer to a question and you feel like you need it quickly. That communication is really important when it comes to information sharing. So it's worth just as a team thinking about, how are we sharing that type of information? Do we have somewhere that's saved and accessible easily for everyone where our key documents are actually put? How are we sharing progress on tasks? So are we updating an Excel file? Do we have a software in the organization that we're all tracking our progress on when it comes to project management, for example? How are we actually using that? Is it working? Is it frustrating? Is there a better way that we can do this? Also, do people know about it? Often when I'm onboarding people into our team, I spend a great deal of time taking them through SharePoint. It can feel quite overwhelming, quite painful. So actually what I've done is I've created a shared drive with all of the key documents that I know my team need to get access to very quickly. I'm updating it with the latest research, any team conversations that we have as well. We share the notes in there so that people can easily access that. So that just removes that frustration that we can often feel from home. We don't always have that opportunity in the office to just walk to somebody else's desk and get their help. We also know that if we don't measure what matters most, we actually don't have any evidence-based strategies to drive behavior change. So measuring what matters most is incredibly important. Now, you may also know Gallup for our Q12 engagement framework. This has been around for many, many years. We actually do a ton of research to ensure that every single one of these items is predictive of performance. We haven't just come up with random questions that we call engagement. We've got very, very specific ways of calculating this. We don't add together the 4s and the 5s and call it satisfaction. This was a very, very robust piece of research that went into making sure that these items were actionable at the manager level, that they were globally generalizable. So all of these things are relevant no matter what country you're in, what level you are, what industry you're in. All of these things are globally generalizable, and they also have to predict performance. We do regular meta-analysis. We've done our most recent one in 2024, where we've studied more than 180,000 teams, and we're making sure that all of these items are predictive of performance. But they're all needs that need to be met. This is an emotional economy. If you think about showing up every day at work, imagine not being that clear on what's expected of you. How are you supposed to perform if you've not got crystal clear clarity on what it is that you're paid to do? Free me from unnecessary stress with Q2. Imagine having to paint a wall, right? And you don't have a paintbrush. So as we think about these needs, it's almost like Maslow's hierarchy. There is absolutely no point in worrying about opportunities to learn and grow, that top item around being challenged, if we don't have the basics nailed down. There's a bit of secret science that goes into this as well. And actually, the bottom 6 items are so important that they will impact the top 6. They're also heavily weighted. So when you get your engagement results back, if you do partner with Gallup, often you'll find that one of your items that's deemed to be low scoring is a 4 point something out of 5, which rationally seems quite high. But actually, if it's one of those bottom items, it's not good enough. We know that you absolutely need to be able to strongly agree on those bottom items to drive true performance. We know that when we get this right, the outcomes on performance are absolutely fantastic. So as I mentioned, the most recent meta-analysis studied more than 3 million employees. So we don't mess about when it comes to research. And we know that the most highly engaged teams, when we compare them to the least engaged teams, have really quite different experiences, not just for their employees, but also for their customers and for their performance metrics. So if a board or a stakeholder group are looking to actually boost performance quickly, measuring those emotional needs of your workforce is the fastest way to start. We know that there is guaranteed return on investment. We also know that we're not getting this right. So in the latest State of the Global Workplace report, we actually learned that only 23% of Australia are engaged at work as it stands today. Now, again, you might work with an organization where you have an engagement platform in place and you're being told that you're 80% or 90% engaged. There are lots of other platforms out there that have quite a different style of measurement. And often what we find is that those metrics are not necessarily a true representation of how people are feeling in the organization. So we have worked with clients that have used other providers who have been very confused because they're telling us that they're 80 or 90% engaged, but they're not performing, but they've got conflict in their team. They're experiencing employee turnover at a rate they can't keep up with. So again, it just goes to show the credibility of Gallup's research. And actually, we know that globally, only 23% of people at work are truly engaged. And we also know that there have been a ton of layoffs this year. I think there was a period early this year where almost every single one of our clients had experienced some kind of restructure or headcount reduction. It's been a huge topic for Australia this year and globally, but there is constant change in boosting productivity, shrinking costs. But actually, the real layoff is that most people are not engaged at work. And if you think about the wasted productivity here, it's bleeding money. The other thing that's important to recognize about engagement is that actually our research has told us that managers account for 70% of that feeling. Most people have left a great organization because of a really bad manager. If you think about showing up to work and having a manager who doesn't really care about you, adds stress and pressure to your workload, doesn't listen, isn't very present, doesn't give you what you need, why would you stay if you had the choice to go? If you flip that on its head and you've got a manager who knows what you do best and wants you to succeed and to thrive, if you've got a manager that cares about you as a person first and as an employee second, you're going to do more for them. You're going to give that discretionary effort. Of course, you're going to perform better. So actually, the role of the manager is the most critical role. Yes, leaders are thinking about the future vision, they're role modeling, they're coming up with a strategy, They're also leading leaders, but actually it's those day-to-day managers who are the most critical when it comes to boosting engagement and the employee experience. So when you think about the Q12 framework, there are also some manager behaviours that we can map onto this. For those of you that are familiar with psychosocial hazards, as per the Safe Work Australia regulations, litigations, by the way, are through the roof now. It seems to be that there are lots of organisations or employees that have found a bit of a loophole and are making claims because they know that they're going to get paid out. The median payout for a psychosocial hazard claim is $40,000. And they're pretty easy to win. An employee really just needs to go to the doctor, get signed off for stress, prove that their organization has put too much workload on them or that their manager has treated them poorly, and they're most likely to win. The fees that organizations are having to pay as well to fight some of these cases are just extortionate. So a lot of these items map on to those psychosocial hazards, which you can find at Safe Work Australia, but they're very closely linked. So as you think about your managers, actually, this is a really great framework to bring in. Even if you're not measuring the Q12 items with Gallup, I would highly recommend using this as a conversation starter, especially in a remote work setting. Are we clear on expectations? Are we having regular conversations about that? I often run an activity with teams, which tends to go one of two ways, where we ask the manager to write down what they think is expected of one of their direct reports. And we ask the direct report to write down what they think is expected of them. And then they swap answers. The gap is often worlds apart. So actually just doing something as simple as that can really boost some of those basic needs, which of course is going to lead to better performance, especially in a remote setting. It shows care, which is one of the most important items there, Q5. It also gives you the opportunity to do what you do best. If you're having those regular feedback conversations and you're talking about where you're struggling, you can really build those relationships with your manager, which of course is going to be absolutely critical for high performance and engagement at work. The next one is a focus on strengths. So Q3, I'll just go back one slide. Q3 there is at work. I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. I want you to think about one of your best days at work. I want you to imagine how that felt. I want you to imagine every moment that you can recall, from waking up in the morning and arriving to the office or logging on at your desk, all the way through to going to bed at night. What made that day so great? Well, the chances are you got to do what you do best. So for me, it would be a day like today where I'm able to share some of Gallup's greatest research, create an impact for the people in my network, connect with new people. And that is very closely linked to my natural strengths and talents. In my Clifton strengths, I've got communication, so I love to present. I've also got a Clifton strength called WOO, which stands for winning others over. I love making new connections and meeting new people. So a day like today for me is going to be one of the days where I'm the most productive. I'm at my highest performance, and I'm the most engaged. So because of that, yes, I still have to do my admin tasks, which if I could pay my way out of, I absolutely would. But my boss is going to make sure that she's coaching me around doing more of this. She's finding opportunities where I get to do what I do best every single day at work. So we know that what leaders have in common, the most exceptional world-class leaders when we study them, and we do, is that they know their true strengths, and they can call on the right strength at the right time. When do I need to lean into my negotiation strengths? When do I need to lean in to how I connect with other people and build relationships? That is what we know great leaders have in common. It's not which strengths they have, it's how they use them and how aware of them they are. We're also very emotional human beings. So Daniel Kahneman, the late Daniel Kahneman, who is a very, very famous scientist. You've probably heard of him. He wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow. He won Nobel Prizes outside of his field, which was behavioral economics. And he actually was one of our scientists at Gallup. We were so lucky to have him here. He actually helped us to understand that humans are only 30% rational and 70% emotional most of the time. If you don't believe me, think about the last time you either bought something that you didn't need or that you snapped at somebody you love. And because we're emotional, we're very instinctive. It's those short circuits in our brain that we're leaning on most of the time. So we've all got these instinctive ways of thinking, feeling, and behavior, and that is talent. Talent is that recurring pattern of thought, feeling, and behavior, the things that we can't help but do. So for some people, it might be that when you're doing your grocery shopping, you have a list, you have an order, and you've actually mapped it out based on the layout of the supermarket. I doubt you were taught to do that. It's just how you're wired. It might be that when you're driving your car and you're at a set of traffic lights, you want to be the first person to pull away. You love to win. It might also be that you have a to-do list, even on the weekend. You have to tick everything off or you just can't sleep. These are recurring patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior. And actually, when we use these well, they can be incredibly helpful. They can be productively applied to help us perform better. So when we've got those examples of talent and we know about them and we're applying them in a way that helps us to be better, they are now strengths. So if you think about a football player who figured out that he was pretty good at kicking goals, but now he'll never miss. He's practiced so often, he's aware of that talent that he is now an absolute superstar. That's how we really move from talent to strength. So Clifton Strengths is actually a talent assessment. It's been used by 36 million people around the world, and that really measures the presence of talent. Now, these are all the talent themes. We split them into 4 different domains. They can jump the fence a little bit, so they're almost fluid walls. But when we know about ourselves and which talent themes are the most present for us, we can really boost not only our relationship with other people at work, but also our performance. And it makes total sense, right? So if you're interested in learning more about Clifton Strengths, you'll have the opportunity to reach out, and I'd absolutely love to share more about that with you. But you can see on screen page 1 of the report. So it's going to give you a little bit of an overview of what your most dominant talent themes are. It's also going to tell you which of those domains you most naturally lead with. We also use this in teams all the time. I don't think I've experienced anything more powerful in my life than walking in to a team workshop and helping people to understand more about themselves and the people they work with for, 40 to 60 to 80 hours per week. How do they connect with other people? How are they different? How could they partner better together? So we know that Clifton Strengths has some absolutely fantastic performance outcomes. You can see those numbers on the screen there. If you presented that to your stakeholders, there wouldn't be a single one that doesn't want those things to happen in their organization. But it also helps you to build self-awareness, manage those blind spots. Each of these strengths come with potential blind spots. So for somebody that leads with high positivity, maybe they're missing some of the risks in a project. It also helps you to really maximize your potential, understand your team, build those relationships, and to really truly connect via a shared language. If we think back to the beginning of this webinar, where we looked at all of those things that were breaking down in a remote world were around collaboration, communication, connection, Clifton Strengths is a really powerful way of shortening the gap between people, even when you're located in different countries, on different time zones. If you can connect with someone by recognizing what's great about them, taking that positive psychology approach to actually lean into what makes someone fantastic, what are their unique contributions, and how can we create more of that experience for them at work, you'll really find that that building relationship experience will come back much more quickly. It's also critical for really boosting an organization's financial outcomes. So this is the Gallup path. And really, if we start at the top and look at stock increase, which every single stakeholder board member is going to be caring about, there is not a single organization that we work with that doesn't have some sort of interest in this. Even not for profit, they've got to think about, how can they boost their top line to make sure that they can pay their staff and keep growing. So when we think about working backwards, it really comes from engaged customers. Engaged customers come from engaged employees. You think about going into that coffee shop, the employee knows your name, they know your order, they ask you how you are, they make their coffee quickly if they can see that you're in a rush. You're going to go back to that shop day in and day out versus an experience where you're not treated with respect. You're not made to feel welcome. So you've got to think about engaging your employees to get those engaged customers. And to engage your employees, we know that it's mapping strengths to role. And that comes from having a great manager, someone that can see those innate talents within you. We've also got to focus on having meaningful conversations. It is the number one manager skill. When we study this forensically, we know that the impact of having one meaningful conversation per week can increase engagement. I recently did this research with one of my clients. They've got 30,000 people across 19 countries in Asia Pacific. For the people that strongly agreed to this item in a survey, they were 59 times more engaged. And that is just one client. We have seen organizations with even higher performance outcomes when we link that. 80% of employees who tell us that they've received meaningful feedback in the past week were fully engaged, regardless of how many days they worked in the office. So this is a great manager's most important habit. This is the one thing that cannot slip. Even if you're busy, it is picking up the phone and making that person feel seen, heard, and developed. However, we're getting it wrong. In a recent study on around 15,000 employees, only 16% of people, 16% of people, and I bet you if we'd studied more employees, that number would drop even more. Only 16% of people could say that their conversation that they had with their manager most recently was meaningful. So again, we know that there are 5 characteristics of making a conversation meaningful when we study this, but the best way to get there is just ask your team. What makes a conversation meaningful to you? But we do know that you've got to focus on recognition or appreciation for something they've done well. You need to be encouraging collaboration and relationships, especially in that remote and hybrid working setting environment. It's also important to discuss goals and priority. You're not just there to have a catch up about the weekend. You need to make sure that it is performance oriented and that you are actually driving accountability. You can make a conversation meaningful in just 5 minutes. Just calling someone and saying, hey, I just wanted to check in and see how you're feeling today. Is there anything that you need from me? Or good luck on a presentation. That can feel meaningful for some people, but we know that these are most meaningful conversations when you dedicate that time. And it also needs to take a strengths-based approach. So we've armed you with some questions here, which we'll get to you in the follow-up email. But this is a really tangible strategy to share with your team and to start doing even today. The last one is the power of purpose. We know that people are really disconnecting from the purpose of their organization. And I think especially with the types of organizations that I know are on the call today, you have got some really powerful purposes behind your organization. When we think about the definition of purpose, it's really the reason for which something exists. There are lots of different sources of purpose. Again, we've studied this. There's a paper that I can share with you. People get a sense of purpose from lots of different things. It might be their family, it might be a hobby, activity, or sport. It might be education or learning. But a lot of people would say that their work or that their career is their biggest sense of purpose. So it's important just to start thinking about, do you know your purpose? Does your purpose in your life align with the work that you do every day? When you think about the organization's purpose, is that communicated clearly? Are we inspired? Is there that bigger sense of the meaning behind why the organization was built in the first place? We know that when people feel a strong sense of purpose at work, there are some really fantastic performance outcomes. So they're almost 4 times as likely to be engaged in their work. Only 11% are going to feel burned out compared to about 52% who don't have that sense of purpose. It can just give you that extra boost to go in and put that extra hour in. You know that you're doing it for a good cause. And also, we've also seen that people with a strong sense of purpose, they're much less likely to look for another job. Even if your purpose at work doesn't connect with your purpose at life, having a strong sense of purpose still boosts engagement. So what you're looking at here is people with a low sense of purpose on the right-hand side. Only 7% of those people are engaged at work, through to moderate, 21% engaged at work. But people who have a strong sense of purpose in their life, even if it's nothing to do with work, are still more engaged. So at the end of the day, performance is human. And when people feel seen, supported, and connected, They don't just do their work, they care about it. And that is the heartbeat of engagement. So I apologize for running over a little bit. I told you that it was kind of a lot to get through, but I'd love to just dive in to some of those questions in the chat. And if there's anything we haven't covered, please do drop me an email. Thank you so much. Back to you, Judy.
Thanks, Hannah. That was really so interesting. I guess you hear that all the time after these sorts of sessions. So we have a few questions. So one is, how can we encourage employees to come into the office 1 to 2 days a week in a way that feels motivating rather than mandatory? And I would also tag on to that, should employees feel put upon if they're asked to come in 1 to 2 days a week when they live in the same city as their workplace?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I would love to have lots of, evidence-based answers to this question, but I'm going to be super transparent. Food and drink works really well. And that's not something that we've necessarily studied in a Gallup poll. But the minute that you put on a couple of beers and some pizza, people get pretty excited about that. So I think offering something, to thank them for their time can be really helpful. I would also encourage people to put on some team building activities. So it might be a workshop based on, managing stress or burnout, or on a topic that's really relevant that's actually led in person. It might even be a team sports day or a yoga class. But I think when we give people a real life physical experience, that really works. The other opportunity that we have seen is pretty powerful is just that in-person conversation. So it might be that your manager takes you for lunch. It might be that you get the opportunity to spend half an hour with a mentor and actually step through some of the things that are there to serve your development in an in-person setting. So I don't know if that answers it completely, but they're some of the things that we know definitely work.
Yeah, thank you. And just maybe you could comment on this if you want to, but you would have seen the Victorian government recently, I don't know if it's in law yet, but mandated that people, office people especially, should be in the office 3 days a week and mandating that. So I think you kind of answered that, but how would you comment on that about taking away choice and affecting the relationship and trust, etc.?
Yeah. So I think that will create challenges. People don't like to be told what to do, so they will see
Yeah.
attrition. There will be people that move states that look for organizations that do offer remote working. So we know that they will see some people leave, but I think it can work when it's positioned in a way that's really motivating and incentivizing. So rather than leaders saying, you have to come in because we're telling you to, if leaders are able to create a bit of an inspiring vision around, we actually would love the opportunity for people to connect with each other because we know that it helps us to reach our goals. We know that people are less burnt out, for example, when they get the time to spend in person. If you can really paint that why as a positive, I think it takes the sting out of it. But yeah, we do know from our research that removing autonomy is unfortunately not something that typically lands well.
Okay. That's great. Thank you. And I think, yeah, painting the why. And I think especially when we've had the choice through COVID and in fact 100% from home, etc. And then a job, such a lot of people on the line being told 3 days a week, you must be in the office. It changes everything, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the other thing I might just add on that is if there's no choice and everyone has to do it, it's creating that sense of, okay, well, we're in it together. Let's go for lunch on Wednesdays. Let's get coffee on Tuesdays. Let's make sure that we have some time together as a team to talk about our key priorities or challenges together. I think that can shift the experience a little bit. We know that people like coming into the office because they have fun. That's another data point that I kind of scrapped from the deck because there were too many numbers on the screen, but people like coming in to spend time with others and have fun. When we ask people who are hybrid that choose to go in why they're actually making the effort, those are the things that come out. So let's focus on that and create that as part of the experience if we are kind of forced against our will to go in.
Okay, thank you. And we do have time, I think, for one quick question. You may have answered this, I think, but how does healthy cognitive function and social interaction with work colleagues shape employee well-being? And how does this differ between office and remote?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So we know, again, from lots of Gallup research, that having that sense of engagement, it reduces burnout. It even reduces things like depression, loneliness, lots of other types of mental health like anxiety. We've got a lot of data on this. So we know that having that positive experience, that cognitive function, that opportunity to connect with other human beings, that's going to boost engagement, which we know has a positive impact on our overall well-being. So it is really important. It can be challenging when people are finding that having to go into the office is creating them more stress. So if they've got long commute times or they're caring for elderly parents or young children, that's really tricky. So I think it's important, especially again from a psychosocial hazard standpoint, for managers to think about how they can support people in other ways if there is that sense of stress from having to be in the office. What other ways can the organization support them? Can they do some of the uh, mental health support programs? Can they make sure that they've got an opportunity to check in with those people who they know are going to be taking the hit a little bit more? Is there any way around compensation to sort of cover some of the costs for care? I think it's important that employers consider that. So that will probably be my comment on that one.
So I think we've covered that, and it's almost 10 o'clock. So Hannah, I just want to say thank you so much for that webinar. We got some, excuse me, great insights, and I think we can all take away some tools, if you like, that we can use for our next staff planning days and that sort of stuff.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to answering any more questions that come through.
Thank you so much, and we'll be sending everyone your presentation. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Have a great day,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Take care.
Bye.